Ladies and gentlemen, if you can take your seats, please. Thank you. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Please know that tonight's program is on the record. It's been live streamed. We welcome your social media engagement, but please silence your phones before we begin. Please know that the views of the individuals we host are their own and do not represent the institutional positions or views of the Chicago Council. And we hope you'll stay after the program. We're going to have a reception, and Bruce and Vicki Heyman will be signing copies of their new book, The Art of Diplomacy, which will also be available for sale over on the by the McCormick Wall. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator, Steve Bynum from WBEZ.
What did you do with this mic? You didn't grab this mic? That would help. A very unusual night, but a wonderful night. And I'm happy that you all came because you're in store for a very special evening. This night is a night about reconciliation, empathy, and community. But before we can talk about the Arctic, we should also take time to discuss those characteristics of our better angels happening right here at home. And in that spirit, we say that we respectfully recognize the Potawatomi, Miami, and Peoria, peoples who for millennia were stewards of the land on which this building sits. We acknowledge this land as occupied, having been forcibly taken from its original owners. And we affirm that while we have no power to change history, we can, with deep humility, work for justice. A justice that begins with recognition and acknowledgement. Land acknowledgement, along with recognizing those who lived here before we were here, also reminds us that this land, as we see now, had not always been so. Modern borders that separate us are man-made constructs. Citizen diplomacy is at the heart of this event tonight. And at its essence, citizen diplomacy unites us and obliterates borders. So we've brought together several voices from two countries, from different cultures and landscapes, to explore their view of the world through telling stories. You will hear 7 storytellers, and they've been tasked with answering a simple question, though complex at the same time. When did you first realize you could change the world? And while they canvass their memories and take us to lands both real and imagined, we beseech you to open your hearts and your minds and lend us your ear. I expect that we will learn something of the differences and surprising similarities in taking on common challenges like education, youth employment, climate change, and identity. A renowned cultural anthropologist once said, "Facts alone will not change minds. You must also appeal to the heart." In that spirit, the Chicago Council on Global Affairs chose tonight's format. And we now bring to you our first storyteller, former United States Ambassador to Canada, who has taken his post-political life and dedicated his post-political life to uniting us, to bringing us together, to being inspired, and to inspiring. I bring to you Bruce Heyman.
It's on my tie. I was testing all of you. Miles B. Heyman, born November 23rd, 1934. B was his middle name, just B. His mom and dad had a disagreement over Bruce or Bernard, and so it was just B. He was really proud of his name, Miles B. I ended up with the Bruce some years later. Miles was one of 4 children. His father had married a wonderful woman and had 2 daughters. Unfortunately, she passed away at a very early age. And he met another wonderful woman in his life, and she had 2 sons, the youngest of which was my dad. In today's day, he might have been deemed to be dyslexic, ADD, no, ADHD, but they didn't do those kinds of things back then, didn't have those kinds of diagnoses. He was just having a more difficult time in school and was a bit more rambunctious. His father was an immigrant, came from Lithuania, and made a go of it by being a traveling salesman. Put wholesale dry goods in his car and went out every day and sold sheets and towels and gloves and things to penitentiaries and schools and stores and wherever he could make a living. And he did quite well doing that through the Depression and helped put all 4 of his kids through college. My father went to Ohio State University. He was so proud of it. The Ohio State University, as he'd tell me. Studied business and education. There he met my mom, and they moved off to Elmira, New York to go into the family business. After a short period of time, unfortunately, that family business, a store, wholesale dry goods store, didn't make it. So he moved to Dayton, Ohio. And this is where my memories really take hold. You see, my dad also became a traveling salesman. He sold children's clothing. And I remember every weekend he'd pack up his bags filled with children's clothing in his station wagon and go driving from city to city throughout the Midwest, Dayton was his home, but he traveled in Indiana and Kentucky and Pennsylvania and Michigan. And I always remember him. I remember his hands. They were so strong because he carried those heavy suitcases, and he always had that Ohio State ring on. But something happened in that car. You see, that car transformed him. He drove some 50,000 miles a year, smoked like a fiend, but he listened to the radio, and he listened to stories, talk radio, public broadcasting or local talk radio. And he'd come home every weekend, and he'd tell stories. I didn't put the connection together originally. I thought my father just had a creative imagination. And it turns out that all of our friends would come and sit around the kitchen table in our house every weekend and listen to those stories. And they thought he was the most intelligent guy. And that continued throughout life. When we had children, his grandchildren, he would also be the storyteller in chief. And that's why we're here tonight. You see, we're going to hear stories. And we're going to do it in honor and memory of my father, who unfortunately passed away just before the 2012 election, which then transformed our life, and Vicki and I going off to Canada to represent our country. He missed all that. But we're going to have stories about that tonight. So here's your mission. You're going to be sitting in that station wagon, driving along. By the way, no cell phones while driving. Good news is no smoking in this room, so you won't smell the residue of cigarettes. And we actually don't have to turn on the radio because we have WBEZ here. We have the Chicago Council, which I'm deeply appreciative of. And we have some of the most amazing storytellers. We found when we went to Canada that there were lots of different ways of doing diplomacy. There's the traditional way, and then there's the art of diplomacy way. The way in which you get to know your neighbor and your friend and people from faraway places, and you realize what you have in common, and you realize where you're a bit different. And it's through the stories that we encountered along the way that we wrote this book, The Art of Diplomacy, that I hope you all get a chance to read and experience in some way our trip through Canada over 3 years representing our country. And we did it together, Vicki and I did. But I'm here to tell you that we brought the most incredible change makers that we have encountered between Chicago and Canada in Ottawa. And these two change makers, we thought they were so impressive individually, we thought, wouldn't that be something if we put them together? And we brought Chicago students to the Arctic. And today we're bringing some Arctic folks to Chicago. And so you're going to hear all of these stories. So I'm pretty excited. And you get to see a little bit right in your seat what we experienced over 3 years. And so thank you for being here. Thank you to the Chicago Council. Thank you to WBEZ. Thank you to so many of the folks you're going to hear speak in just a few minutes. And thank you to all of you who had the confidence to get out on this rainy, crazy day to go experience something that you actually didn't know what you were going to experience, but we somehow convinced you to do it. And thank you to my dad. And thank you to my dad for all of the wonderful stories and leadership and guidance and confidence that he gave me throughout my life to allow me to be the success that I become. And thank you to all of you who are parents and the work that you do with your families. So with that, we're going to begin some stories.
Ambassador Heyman talked about one of the primal ties that bind the relationship between a father and a son. and the importance of family, gathering together, telling stories. I'm reminded of the trips I would take to Memphis, Tennessee with my family, the reverse Great Migration. My grandparents came north after the war, and so we would return every summer. And as we crossed the Mississippi River, I would always remember these songs, these old blues songs that would just ruminate in my mind, and I never forgot them. And so that soul music, and we all have that version in our lives, that soul music is what binds us together and some of the greatest and most beautiful memories in our lives. And now we're going to have a gentleman come to the floor and perform his soul music for you. And his name is Nelson Tagoona. He is a professional beatboxer, solo throat box inventor, dynamic and creative musician, and gold miner from Baker Lake, Nunavut. Please welcome Nelson to the stage.
Okay, so before I get started, I have a looper in front of me. It's going to change my voice. It's a vocal processor and looper. But before I really get started, I'm going to give you guys some rules and try to remember these rules. And I just want to start off our stories on a very high note before we get deep into them. So every time I throw my hand in the air, I want everyone to scream, "Hey!" Okay, 3, 2, 1. Hey! I know you could do better than that. 3, 2, 1. Hey! I'm going to give you guys another chance. 3, 2, 1. There we go. Okay, so let's do a test run. I'm going to do a quick beat. I'll speak to you guys for a minute, and then we'll really get the show started. Okay. Make some noise for yourselves. You guys are so amazing. Okay, so that was rule number 1. Now I have 2 more. When I point to the floor, I want you to say, yeah. Okay, yeah. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Okay, now when I throw my hand up exactly like this, I want to hear you guys say, I believe in myself. Okay, 3, 2, 1. I believe in myself. That's so beautiful. Okay, let me get this started. Okay, so before I get started, I want to give a big thank you to Bruce Heyman and Vicki Heyman for being such great people towards me, and the indigenous people all across the north. They were such beautiful people, and I also want to shed some spotlight on Geoff Green for his work with the indigenous people of the north. I think people like this are the reason why youth who haven't grown up with much up north feel like we have a future, because in a lot of communities we're not exposed to the things that many are exposed to on a daily basis in the city or in other communities across the country. So again, I want to give a big thank you to those, because at one point I was one of those youth, and I never thought I would have made it this far in my music career. For example, when I was 10 years old, I was into this guitar piece, and he had an orchestra playing behind him. And my mom would tell me, Nelson, you know, you might want to focus on other goals, because there's no one in Nunavut who will perform in front of an orchestra and be the leader of an orchestra. And there's very low chance to even perform outside of our community. There aren't many people in Okalik to have you exposed. But I had my aha moment, actually, very recently. I got contacted by Red Sky Performance and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra, and they told me we would like to compose a piece around your work. So actually, earlier last month, I played my 8th show with the Toronto Symphony Orchestra at the Roy Thompson Hall. I thought that was really, really cool. And we actually flew down to Merida, Mexico, and we performed with the Caribbean Symphony Orchestra as well. You know, so that really shows me that as long as you have that seed of hope within you, you could break through barriers that you never thought you had a chance to break through. So my key to doing that is I incorporated my culture and who I am. Nelson Tagoona, Maatalii. My name is Nelson Tagoona, and I am from Baker Lake, Nunavut. I'm Inuk. Some call it Eskimo, but I prefer the term Inuk. Thank you. I use something called throat boxing, which is the mix between traditional Inuit throat singing and beatboxing. So if you hear traditional Inuit throat singing, which you will, it'll sound something like this. Up, 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 up. It'll sound something like that. And then when you add the beat, it'll be like... Again, I want to thank all of you guys for coming. Thank you guys so much. And I think it's about time to get the show really started. Okay? So on 3, 2, 1. Thank you guys so much. Make some noise for yourselves. You guys are doing good. All right, phase 2. Are you guys ready? This is where the game begins.
Let me hear you make noise. I can't hear you. Everybody make noise. Everybody
You guys are so good. Make some noise for yourselves. You guys are doing a good job. Okay, now as we go through this performance section, we're going to get deeper and deeper into the original traditional sound. So to finish off my last few minutes that I have on stage with you, I want to invite Maatalii Okalik. Make some noise for Maatalii Okalik.
Hello.
Okay. So I'm going to start off with a real traditional sound, and then we're going to get deeper and deeper into, into a very contemporary form. Make some noise for Maatalii Okalik. Thank you guys so much. Thank you so much. I'm going to give the stage to Maatalii now.
Another round of applause for Nelson Tagoona. That was my very first time to throat sing / throat box. So thank you so much, Nelson, for the opportunity. Inuit all across Inuit Nunat are so proud of the amazing work that you do. So thank you so much. Maatalii ani rak saulu saki ukaliu yunga. Panotu miutaksaya yunga, kisiani mana ekalu miutau yunga. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Maatalii Anirak Saulu Saki Okalik. I'm originally from Panoktuk in Nunavut, but I live in Iqaluit. I requested to show this map of Inuit Nunat, which is our homeland, with you today, because I wanted to show to you, despite the conversation about man-made lines, where it is that we come from as Inuit and why Inuit Nunat, our homeland, is important to us. We are a small population across the world, approximately 265,000 of us. We're one people, but we were just colonized by 4 different nation states. So us Inuit, we reside, Nelson and I, in Nunavut in northern Canada, exemplified on the map in purple. We have relations in Kalatlit Nunat, better known in English as Greenland. They were colonized by the Danes. We have Inuit in Russia, and we also have Inuit in the United States, in Alaska. This is where we come from. And so much has changed in my family's living history. My grandparents lived nomadic lifestyle, and it'll be my first time actually this coming July to return to our ancestral homeland, which I'm looking so forward to. Prior to being relocated as a people to the communities that you see on the map today, we as Inuit actually serve as human flagpoles to assert sovereignty for our country in Canada. The reason why I bring that up is because we didn't get what we bargained for. We as Inuit youth face a lot of challenges in our communities today. We do not live like our fellow citizens in Canada, and what we ultimately want is to live equally, but stay living in our homeland. Some of the statistics that I share with people to help them understand what challenges I'm talking about include us having severe food insecurity. 7 out of 10 Inuit in Nunavut are food insecure. They do not have enough food to eat. We have a high rate of overcrowding in our homes, which influences our health. We have tuberculosis, which is an eradicated disease in the developed world that some Inuit youth are dying from more and more as the disease continues to spread. We have lower success rates in education and therefore less Inuit accessing post-secondary education. But there are so many examples of those statistics changing because Inuit youth are starting to learn more about our history, which is so important to us. Nelson and I shared some traditional and contemporary throat singing. And throat singing is an example of something that could have been lost in terms of our cultural practice and traditions because of colonialization. Throat singing is a form of art that mimics what is so important to us, which is our land and our animals, of which we thrive off of, and which is actually our main source of food. I bring that up because despite it being a contemporary lifestyle, we feel like we are living in 2 different worlds, both traditional as well as like today. Here we are in Chicago, and I'm going to teach you an Inuktitut word really quickly. It's anoraktok. Ready with me? Anoraktok. That means it is windy. Okay? I'm so happy to share some Inuktitut with you as I had opened because it is a language, the strongest Indigenous language in Canada, despite the assimilation practices by the federal government to extinguish not only our language, but our culture and our way of life. Though it continues to be on a decline, and we as Inuit youth would like to ensure that we are able to raise our families in Inuktitut. So remember that one for maybe every day when you step outside. So I guess all I would like to share, I'd like to conclude by saying, despite the history of colonization, despite the negative socioeconomic factors that we experience on a daily basis, we are doing our very best to continue to thrive as Inuit, continue to promote our culture and raise the future generations in our culture. And another very important thing about what it is that we'd like for our future is the continued protection of our homeland, Inuit Nunat, and ensure that we are able to live peacefully in our homeland. With the changing climate and a melting sea ice and more traffic in our homeland, we want to be able to protect it as it is our backyard, but we need your help. So I'm grateful that you've all come today with an open mind and an open heart to understand where it is that we come from. And I hope that you, as well as your friends and all the other nations in our global community as well, respect our homeland and what it is that we'd like. And that's to continue to live in our homeland in a peaceful way, reflective of who we are and our rich culture. So with that, I say Kuyan Namik. Thank you very much.
Kuyanamik Maatalii. Facts alone are not enough. Your hearts were moved. And I ask you, close your eyes. Where did you go when you heard these sounds, this beautiful music, this symphony of nature and humanity, history, all coming together at once? In our imaginations, we can go anywhere, but sometimes you need a little bit more. You need to be confronted with where we are in the world, in the universe. Sometimes it's beneath the stars, sometimes it's before your God, sometimes it's in the recesses of your mind and your dreams. And so when you have that aha moment, then something changes. You are transformed. The term is called in Greek metanoia, to change the inner eye of the heart or the soul. And so we're fortunate to have here tonight people who are willing to take that next step, to help those go beyond what they could not even conceive for themselves. One gentleman that you're going to meet, his name is Geoff Green. For 20 years, he's made it his mission to take young people, because young people, it's something that's different. When they experience something that's transformative, then they lead us. We've done a poor job of leading them. And now we see that young people are saying, get out of our way. We're not going to accept the world that you would have us, that you would give to us. We're going to create a new world. And so Geoff Green is founder and president of Students on Ice Foundation. And he's been taking young people to the Arctic, and he's going to come and share his story. Geoff.
Good evening, everybody. Bonsoir. Ulakut. I wanted to start by thanking Steve for beginning tonight with the traditional land acknowledgement of the traditional territory that we're all on here tonight. I also really want to thank Bruce and Vicki for convening us all here. They're so great at being amazing conveners, and tonight they've brought our Chicago, Arctic, Canada family together, and all of you. And I have to say, speaking on behalf of my country, Canada, we really miss Bruce and Vicki. And we wanted them back, but luckily we get to see them quite a bit. But you could not have had two better ambassadors for your city and for your country than Bruce and Vicki. So let's hear it for those two. So in the next 6 minutes, I'm supposed to share some stories. And I love telling stories, and I'll do my best in 6 minutes. The first is actually in lead up to preparing for tonight, I saw Bruce and Vicki in Ottawa about 2 weeks ago, and they were there speaking about their amazing new book. And my dad called me. And my dad doesn't call me out of the blue very often, but he wanted to tell me that he was driving down the highway, listening to CBC, and he heard Bruce and Vicki on the radio. He said, "Don't you know them?" I said, "Yeah." Well, he said, "They're amazing. That made our drive so much easier." And I shared that with Bruce, and then Bruce said, he sort of paused and then told me the story of his father and how he really learned so much by listening to the radio while he was on his long journeys on the road. So a serendipitous moment leading up to tonight. In preparing for tonight, the theme that emerged was that of life journeys. We're all on this amazing life journey. There's lots of bumps and twists and turns and highs and lows and surprises, but that's what makes it so great, right? Plan E, G, D, W is way better than plan A. And sometimes something as simple as turning left instead of right can change your life, especially when you're young. So to take another step back to why I'm here, my life journey's brought me here, I think it's partially because, and maybe why I feel so at home in Chicago, is because of that big lake out there. I grew up on Lake Ontario, and I used to play beside this little creek, the Wilmot Creek, that flowed into Lake Ontario. And as I grew up, I learned that that lake flowed into a big river called the St. Lawrence, that flowed into the Gulf of St. Lawrence, that flowed into the Atlantic Ocean and into the rest of the world, including the Arctic. Well, eventually my life journey took me down that river and took me into that ocean. And I ran out of money and called my mom from Europe. I was 19 years old, and fast forwarding here. I said, Mom, can you send me money to get me home? And of course she said, no problem. But it took a long time in the late 80s to move money around. I went down to the harbor and thought, maybe I'll get a job on one of these boats. Called the owner in England, Collect. After a 10-minute phone call, he told me to move on board tonight. You're the new captain. I'm like, cool. That took me to every ocean, every continent, and eventually, of course, to the polar regions. These windows to the world, these symbols of peace and understanding and of international cooperation and so much more. One day, I'd been leading expeditions mostly for adult scientists and world leaders, CEOs, wacky adventurers, but one day standing on a beach surrounded by about 500,000 chin-strap penguins that really smell bad and peck you a lot, I thought, imagine if we could give this experience to youth at the beginning of their life. So I started talking to anybody who listened, and Students on Ice was born. I maxed out 7 credit cards, chartered an icebreaker. The first expedition was for 50 Canadian high school students. And it exceeded its objective. It changed lives, and it opened horizons and changed perspectives, and away we went. It's evolved a lot since then. It quickly became international. It quickly became very global because the issues we were looking at, climate change, for instance, were global issues, and we needed to bring youth together from all walks of life to address those global issues. And thanks to all kinds of amazing people and partnerships like the one we have here in Chicago with Embark and Unlimited, Bruce and Vicki, and Students on Ice, we now have this wonderful family. We've got Lataric and Cassy here. From last year. Hey, Lataric, how are you, buddy? And 2 new students coming this summer coming up. On these expeditions, we might put in one cabin a student from Chicago in the same cabin as a student from Nunavut. One never stops talking, like the Lataric, and the other never talks. But by the end of that journey, this bond has been formed, and they are best friends, and they're bawling their eyes out at the airport at the end of this journey together to one of the ends of the earth. And history has proven it's things like that, it's connections like that truly do change the world. And I walk away from this with tremendous hope every single year that we do these expeditions. We've now taken over 3,000 kids from 57 countries. This summer we'll have 18 countries on board. 40% of the youth will be indigenous, but also inner city, third world, first world. Almost all the students are supported by scholarships that are funded by partners around the world. So any youth that wants to go can go. Our lives are a lot like an expedition. And I think that's a beautiful thing. But you can't just sort of blow with the wind and let it take you wherever it's going to take you. You need to set a course, but inevitably, because of wind and weather and maybe an iceberg or two, you got to change course. You got to be the navigator of your own life, because we all know what happens when you don't change. If you're a stubborn navigator and you don't change course for the iceberg, right? And I think that's a beautiful metaphor for all of us, but particularly for our youth, living in this very vulnerable time, vulnerable in the sense of politics around the world, and definitely in terms of the state of our environment. We are in a window of opportunity to take action to address big issues like climate change, like ocean health. Life on Earth needs a healthy ocean, not the other way around. And no matter where you live, you're connected to that. Here in Chicago, you're directly connected to the biggest thing that's ever lived in the world, blue whales in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. We're all connected by the air we breathe and the water we drink. And we need to give opportunities to our youth now to change the world and make it what it can be. And you see examples of it here tonight. Can't wait till you hear Cassy sing in a few minutes. And thank you so much for coming tonight and allowing me to share a few stories. Merci beaucoup.
The Chicago Council, the Heymans, brought Geoff and Nelson and Maatalii from different parts of the world here. Why? Why Chicago? Why now? Producing a global affairs show, and I've talked to Evil Dalder, president here at the council, about this. You're always in this battle to sort of justify why you do what you do. What's the connection? Why does it matter? Sometimes people make it easy for you, like the gentleman you're about to meet, Imran Khan. No, he's not the leader of Pakistan. For a split second, I wondered. But he is the president and CEO of Embark. So what does he do? He works on the South Side to create experiences like this for kids. And as one born and raised on the South Side, I can tell you it's the only thing you do on the South Side is work. So it's my pleasure to introduce to you Imran Khan.
Let me tell you where I've been, where I come from.
In the spirit of talking about experiences, talking about borders, I want to tell you a little bit about my story and how it began before we ever came in this city of Chicago. I was born and raised, but my parents are from India. My mom came from a northern village, very dark-skinned. My dad came from central part of India, very light-skinned. He was Muslim, she was Christian. They never should have married. They never should have met each other in New Delhi. They never should have fell in love when he walked onto a bus and said some joke that I know was a dad joke, and I'm sure it was terrible. And she laughed. She got off the bus. He gets off the bus. Will you have tea with me? And she says, absolutely not. I have no idea who you are. That was funny, but that's about it. And I'm sure she said something else, but this is good for the story. And then he goes, oh, okay, well, by the way, you work at that hospital, right? And she's like, yeah, she was a nurse. And he said, you get off right about this time every day? And she's like, yeah. 2 weeks. He shows up at that bus stand. He meets her on that bus. He tells different jokes. And eventually she has tea with him. They fall in love. And as a nurse, she brought my family to this country. And when they were getting to the airport, they were like, we're going to Seattle. They heard about it, I guess, from somewhere. The flight to Chicago was leaving sooner. jumped on a plane, landed in Chicago, got into the airport, opened a phone book, looked for an apartment, found an apartment building that had the same name as I do, our last name, Khan Apartments, and they said, that's the one. They went over there, and the next morning, they woke up and my dad was, they paid the rent. My dad walks outside and one of, an Indian guy outside was hanging out and he goes, hey, how are you? And he goes, how are you? And he goes, where are you staying? And he goes, I'm staying here. And he goes, you mean in this halfway house? And then he goes, well, that explains why everyone was screaming last night. As my family was here in this country, we didn't have very much growing up. My dad was a dishwasher, a bus driver, pizza delivery guy, real estate agent. I remember some of my earliest memories was when we learned what it meant to be evicted when we found our furniture on the street as we were walking home. And I remember talking to my parents as we were walking by. Earliest memory, and I was just like, why aren't we going home? And I remember there was something wrong. I couldn't tell, but I remember there was furniture out there. Later, I remember getting food from pantries. Still have a taste for this thing that they call Geoff. I guess it's like cornbread. I know there's fans in here. Still eat that. But as I went through school, my mom would do all this stuff, like bring a lot of people to stay at our house and to be our babysitters. And I remember one day I was going to college and I came out of the bathroom and my mom had laid down on the bed and said that her head hurt and she's totally fine. But I started to see her face change shapes on half side, and I realized that she was having a stroke. She had 3 strokes while I was going to business school. Right then, and when you get in the ambulance and you go to the hospital and they tell you they can't do anything and you have to watch her face sort of change, her arm, and then go to hospice care, and they tell you that she's gonna pass away. Something happens to you. You start asking yourself, what's going on with my life? What am I doing? Why? What was the legacy that my mom left? Why did she bring all these women into the house who were like homeless? Or why did she work at a battered women's shelter and left nursing? You start asking yourself all these questions about what it all meant and what was the purpose of all that and what was my legacy and how might I honor her and how might I honor my family? And then I looked around while I was in accounting class, and I go, oh God, I don't know any of these people. This is terrible. I can't stay here. And so I joined to become a teacher. I decided what's the place I could have the highest and greatest impact in the fastest way possible, honor that legacy. And so I became a teacher, ended up teaching in the south side of Chicago in West Englewood. It's become notorious as the most dangerous school in America. 29 kids were shot in a single school year there. And while I was teaching there, I came to understand, and many of you who are from Chicago, you've come to understand the story, that we have classrooms and schools full of students who have never seen the lake, never been downtown, never been in an elevator, students who had never set foot in the kind of grocery stores or restaurants we know. And I started to see how much of an impact that played in their minds on how they understood their self and their place in the world. I'll tell you a story. I remember when I was like, okay, as a teacher, one of the things you gotta do is I was getting eaten alive. I thought, I'm cool as hell. I'm gonna go into this classroom. They're gonna love me. I'm just gonna be like, I was born and raised in the city of Chicago, and I'm gonna college dreams all over them. But it was so hard. I was getting eaten alive. And I'm like, listen, what's my strategy? I got to win over a couple of these guys. I knew that if I got some of the influencers in those rooms, it would flip. So I found 2 in each class. I had 10 guys. I was like, you know what? I'm going to get them on my side. They haven't had that many experiences. What am I going to do? I'm going to take them out with me for dinner. We're going to go to eat burgers. Everybody loves burgers. We were going to go to Michael Jordan's restaurant that was in West Loop. Everybody's heard of Michael Jordan. This is going to be awesome. I'm going to win them over. I spent 2 weeks prepping the guys. Hey, what's going on? You want to go to burgers later? 2 weeks from now? And they were like, what are you talking about? And soon I'm like, no, seriously, we're going to have dinner. It's going to be awesome. We're going to go to this place. And The day comes, we're about to go to the restaurant. And I've been telling everybody, all these guys, the whole week, the bell rings, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. God, where are they? I go through the hallway, I find 2 of them playing basketball. And I'm like, what happened? We were about to go on this restaurant. And they're like, wait, where's everybody else? I'm like, are you hungry or not? We ended up going to Michael Jordan's restaurant, get in the car. We go to this restaurant. We walk in. It's beautiful. I made sure that the manager and everybody knew we were going to be there. So they sit us at this table, and the manager walks up and goes, let me take you for a tour. Let me show you around. We go, we look at the back room, beautifully decorated. We look at the kitchen. We see all the chefs. We look at all the stuff that's happening in the restaurant. It's pretty empty. We go sit down at the desk, and she walks away. She says, I'm going to send some desserts. She walks away. And then one of the guys, he has God's son tattooed across his throat, like right here. He leans over and he goes, hey, Mr. Khan, I feel like I just won the lottery. I feel like a millionaire. How can you afford eating at this restaurant? You're just a teacher. And that was when I realized that lack of experiences in many ways, that lack of exposure, our students didn't realize that you can do A, B, C, and D in school, which would earn you this type of a life where you could earn $42,000 as a teacher and eat at a restaurant like this, because it was $4 burger night, and have this kind of thing, and that would be a life that you could live. Fast forward, I realized my students had never been in a grocery store either. And I'm like, I'm going to take them. Whole Foods just opens up in Lincoln Park. And I'm like, I'm going to take them to the biggest, craziest, scariest grocery store in the world. And I'm going to feed them food from all over. They're going to see the fruit, weird, crazy looking things. They're going to eat food. They're going to have all of this experience. And afterwards, we're going to go to a farm. And then one of my students, Malik, refused to turn in his field trip slips. And finally, I asked him why not. And he pulled me to the side and he said, Mr. Khan, you know we don't belong there. I'm going to make a fool of myself. People will laugh at me. There's no way I'm going. The borders that separate us may be physical, but they really exist internally. And those are the far greater divisions that are separating us than anything else. And as we think about our future, as we think about our education, as we think about the world we leave, for the young people and the youth, we need to realize that it's inside, and those are the borders that we must dissolve. Any single student in this city or beyond need to hear yes, need to know that the world belongs to them, need to know that they belong anywhere. And if they don't know that, it's our fault as adults, the ecosystem and the structures that we have left them. It's our responsibility to do something about it. Thank you.
About a week ago, actually here, Patricia Sellers was here, and she was a former prosecutor for the International War Crimes Tribunal of Yugoslavia. And we were talking about conflict-related sexual violence. She's also an advisor on the Rwanda Tribunal. And we were having dinner after the event, and we were talking. The first thing that came out of her mouth in the first conversation we had was about how she, as an African-American woman who grew up in Baltimore, in Camden, the equivalent of the south side of Chicago where I grew up, ended up becoming the prosecutor for the War Crimes Tribunal of Yugoslavia, and how it made her feel different, and the obstacles she had to overcome, and even from people who loved her who thought she was a little bit strange, a little bit off. And my experiences were similar. I got on a plane and I flew away, and all of a sudden I decided the world was mine, and so international affairs was my passion. And so the ability to leave the neighborhood that I thought I'd never leave and have those experiences that brought me here, where I can say I shook a Pope's hand, I've met 2 presidents. The young lady I'm going to introduce to you, she's also from the south side of Chicago, and she, like Patricia Sellers, like myself, we have an inheritance. But an inheritance is a debt which must be repaid. It is not a gift that is given to you. And so, Cassy Jade is a singer-songwriter. She is a multi-talented artist, and she's going to share with you how music inspires her to give life, hope, and faith to others.
You feel it on your skin, the sun is glistening, cleansing your body of sin.
I don't think it's working. Oh, now it's working. Okay, hello everybody, good afternoon. Hey. Hi. My name is Cassy. I am a student, well, I was a student on ICE, and a former member of Embark, sorry. Today I'm not only sharing my story with you guys, but I'm also going to be sharing a little bit of music with you guys, so I hope you guys enjoy that part. I guess I just want to begin by telling you guys how I got to the Arctic and where I am now. So I went to high school at Chicago Tech Academy. It's a small tech school on the south side of Chicago. And that is where I had the wonderful opportunity to take the elective class Embark, and I had such a great time with it. It also led me to going on Students on Ice. And let me tell you guys, it is so alien compared to what I am used to here in Chicago. I'm talking about towering glaciers, polar bears, whales, all that. Like, you're looking at it, but your eyes, like, it don't allow your mind to process what you are seeing still. Even if you're there in the moment, you're like not there, if that makes sense. And not only is the site like outstanding, the people you meet on the way there, like I am very like appreciative of the Inuit sharing their culture so openly with us and just taking us in sort of like we were family while we were there, and I really appreciate that. I've met so many people, and it allowed me to connect and do wonderful things. Some of the people I am still connected with till this day. Some are here, and some are on their own journey. One of the people that I met that has had such the biggest profound impact on me has been Dari. He's a singer and songwriter from Toronto. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it tonight, but shout out to Dari. He has been my music mentor ever since. We kind of have a funny story of how we met. We met on the ship in the Arctic. I knew beforehand, like, he did music, so, like, I kind of awkwardly approached him, like, are you the music guy? Like, because I was really shy, and, like, I didn't want to be out there like that. Like, I never sang for anybody, so I was like, are you the music guy? You know, like, give me your ear. Come over here. Like, I even whispered saying, like, I don't even know, like, and he was, like, kind of mad that I came to him last minute because this was like 3 days before having to leave the ship. So he was like, why did you come to me beforehand? I was like, I don't know, I'm a little shy. So yeah, we actually ended up performing the same song we rehearsed the same night because we would have like little talent shows every day, and I was just feeling so bold and everything with the words and charisma he gave me. I was just like, all right, let's do this. I got on stage, I was so nervous. My heart. I messed up my own lyrics and everything, but now I got it down, but yeah. We actually ended up professionally recording it later on, so that's this version you guys will be hearing later on. And I'm really thankful for like everything he's done. Same with Bruce and Vicki. They're the ones that were, able for it all to happen. I just like to say how it changed me so much. I wouldn't be here today talking to you guys like this. Like, this is not Cassandra. This is Cassy. Like, I'm out here now. And we spent a lot of time working on the song, so I hope you guys just really enjoy it. And it means a lot to me. The song is called Blood. It's actually produced and mixed by Dari himself. So I just hope you guys really enjoy it. Okay. You're the blood in my body, you really like nobody. Smiles like I never seen, 'cause really you're my everything. Baby, you're the only one, you stand out like the midnight sun. You'll never understand that I give you all I can. Oh, darling, I hear you calling, you love me, you love me. Oh,
flee till it's the heart will never bite. You truly are my heart. You truly are my heart. Our love is red light in my heart. You had me from the start. You had me from the start. You truly are my heart. You truly are my heart. You're the blood in my body, really like nobody. Smiles like I never seen, 'cause really you're my everything. Baby, you're the only one. You stand out like the midnight sun. You'll never understand that I give you all I can. Oh, darling, I hear you calling. You love me, you love me. Oh, darling, I hear you calling. You love me, you love me. As we flee till it's the heart will never bite. You truly are my heart. You truly are my heart. Our love is red light in my heart. You had me from the start. You had me from the start. You truly have my heart. You truly have my heart. You're the blood in my body, really like nobody. Smiles like I never seen, 'cause really you're my everything. Baby, you're the only one. You stand out like the midnight sun. You'll never understand that I give you all I can. Oh, darling, I hear you calling. You love me, you love me. Oh, darling, I hear you calling. You love me, you love me. And that's it.
Wow. Look at that. So I'm not really going to tell you a story. I'm going to tell you how lucky I feel. It's pretty amazing. I think the power of changing the world is everybody in this room. I look around, and Bruce and I have been on this crazy, wonderful book tour talking about the art of diplomacy and our book, but it's so much more than a book. This is the art of diplomacy in real time. So, you know, our book is about relationships between two incredible countries, Canada and the US, relationships between ourselves and people that we met on our Canadian journey. Extraordinary people like Maatalii and Nelson and Geoff and many, many others. From change makers to fishermen to farmers to artists to prime ministers, Supreme Court justices to average Canadians you're meeting on the street. Each one has their own extraordinary story to tell and power. And for me, I feel so deeply about the power of story and the power of human connection. And that has been our North Star and the way in which we've connected people in our journey and really what we feel is our purpose. If we can bring together people like each of you to be citizen and civic ambassadors for your own passions and ideas, your own purpose, your schools, your community, your country, then we're doing everything right. And so I just want to say, you know, thank you to each of you. We talk about on this book tour we've been on about, you know, we are, between Canada and the US, we are family. There are 1 million Americans living in Canada and probably at least 1 million Canadians living in America, and we truly do cross border as family, but we're so much more than that. I look here and I think, our Obama family is here. Our Embark family is here. Our Students on Ice family, our real family is here. Our kids are here, and our friends who are like family. And, no matter how challenging our times are, we have our family. And that's who we have to lean on. And we know we can always go home to our family. So I think now, in the time that we're living in, there's never been a more important time to hunker down with all of our families and lock arms and go change the world. So with that, I just want to say to changing the world, to connecting with family, and we're going to have an opportunity in just a few minutes to have a Q&A. We're all going to take a seat here. I was instructed it's going to take about 45 seconds while they set up the stage. So everyone hold their seats, and we're going to invite you to ask questions of all of our storytellers today, and you may hear a few additional stories. And then we'll invite you after the storytelling to join Bruce and me at the table. We'll be happy to sign books for anybody who wants to buy them and have a glass of wine in the back. So now we're going to take 45 seconds to set up the Q&A, and Steve's going to run that. So thank you all for being here.
Si vous voulez pas venir, à docteur leur tourner, digo me akuna, kayo sinakara, ayong kakano kaya lauma. I have a language that was born with time, passed on through generations, one of a kind. Keep it close to me, close to my heart, share for all to hear. I will do my part. Upigoso, I am proud. Dino, I am human. I am people.
How about that? This is my new buddy, Vicki. She's never met a stranger. So we've got a few minutes where we're going to do some Q&A, take some questions, and reflect. And usually in the Q&A, you ask a question, everyone answers. We don't have the time to do that, so we'll sort of direct the questions. And council staff, they have microphones, and so you just raise your hand, and they'll bring the mic to you. But I want to direct the first question to Bruce and Vicki to talk about this connection between Chicago and the Arctic. First of all, where did you get this nutty idea? And tell me about the transformation you've seen in these young people as a result of this work.
So, completely nutty idea. I wanted to have a surprise party for Vicki for her birthday. And in lieu of gifts, we asked people to give a contribution to two organizations, Students on Ice or Embark, because I knew these were two organizations Vicki cared about, but the magic of bringing them together, I knew that she would be incredibly surprised. So
but the Arctic,
that was the gift.
The Arctic, though, really? I mean, the Arctic, come on.
Well, people here think it's cold. When I was talking with Nelson and I told him about our polar vortex, and he looked at me like, so how cold did it get? I said, I don't know, 40, 50 below. And he says, well, that's about every day. The other day, he says, some days got down to -70. And I'm like, okay, we're nothing. So I thought, it showed the warmth of the people in the Arctic, and our experience with the Inuit was just so amazing. So,
I would say Geoff was our window to the Arctic. And when we first came to Ottawa, early 2014, Geoff was among the first person that we met, and I had already been doing business with Imran. We met each other right after the 2012 campaign, and Imran brought me down to school at Harper High, and I thought, I've always thought of Imran as just a transformative change maker. And I met Geoff, and I said to Bruce, okay, I've met Imran of the North now. And I could see the same kind of energy and sophistication in the way Geoff was approaching engaging youth in experiences that were real and learning, experience-based learning. And I thought, here are these two guys that are really kind of the same people working in very different communities, but empowering you through transformational change and life-based experiences. And I had actually had Imran came to visit us in Canada, and I'm like, you got to meet Geoff. And I kept telling Geoff, you got to meet Imran. So when I walked into the birthday party and they were there, I was like, okay, this is getting real now. And Imran, Embark selected Cassy and Latarik, our first two students on ICE, Embark students to join. And it's a really now become a sophisticated process at Embark.
Stand up.
There's Latarik. I'd like everyone. Yeah, so they're class number 1. But then how about Jade and Kasia? Where are you? Right there, class number 2. And then we have class number 3, Liliana and Donovan. Stand up. They'll be joining us in the Arctic next year. So we had this great idea of what if we connect this incredible Chicago youth to the North, and it just unfolded.
Great. Questions? Gentleman right here in the front. We're going to bring you a microphone.
Here you go, sir.
Aren't there some big diamond mines in the Inuit territory now? And if so, has that impacted your lifestyle?
You want to give that?
There's I can't recall of any diamond mines, and I think that would, there is a Diavik mine in the NWT. The mine that I work for is known as Agnico Eagle, and though they have their, I'm actually legally not allowed to talk much about this. I could shine on some. I signed a legal promise saying I'm not going to say this. Don't do it. Yeah, I'm not going to. But I mean, they try their best, and they do their best for the people up there, and they try to make ends. They try to pull their weight to make sure the communities are happy with the Agnico Eagle mines, and there are some things that are a bit annoying about mining. I mean, you can't do. I mean, it's mining. Come on. But I mean, they do a really good job though, and they try their very best to not interrupt the migration patterns of the animals, and try to. The thing that I love most about being an employee there is their number one priority is the employee. They look after their employees, and that's the end of the story. They look after their employees. They make sure we're happy. And they keep it a safe place for us. And I'm an emergency responder up there, and I'm aware of how serious they are about the safety and the employees up there.
So when our self-determination as a people had reached kind of the very bottom after the implications of assimilation policies on us as Inuit, it was actually Inuit youth who came together and mobilized to ensure that we were able to negotiate constitutionally entrenched agreements which created our land claims, the 4 land claims that we have in Canada. And as part of the creation of those land claims, because they were thinking about protecting our land despite the developments like resource extraction, they included in those land claims that any business that would like to do business in our homeland must sign and negotiate on an Inuit impact benefit agreement so that their business does not take away what matters most to us.
What's your educational background? It sounds like you have a pretty deep handle on the legal kind of implications. No to you. Yeah, and then how did you get voted in to be the youth leader of the Inuit?
So I actually, after taking 7 years off from my studies, just finished my undergraduate degree in political science. But the reason why I'm on top of issues important to us as Inuit is because we have no choice. We demand that we have a good quality of life because we are living in many instances in third world conditions, despite us living as Canadians. Don't get it wrong, I'm not against Canada. We as Inuit say we're first Canadians, Canadians first. However, when the United Nations created the Millennium Development Goals so that international populations living in third world countries could achieve equality in essential services, I didn't understand how we as Canadians had those same statistics. So myself, along with a lot of Inuit youth across Canada, are trained to ensure that we are aware of our rights so that we may celebrate those essential services and live well on a daily basis and for the generations to come. We as Inuit have an obligation to think about the many generations to come, which is why we have been ringing the bell on climate change for many decades now, and we only hope that the world can with us.
Were you voted in?
I was voted in. That was from my term was from 2015 to 2017. And as Inuit in Canada and internationally, we have our own governance structures, despite the fact that we live within these nation states. And I was elected in. And there will be an election in the next few months for a new president. And you can follow along the pressing issues as well as the ways we celebrate being Inuit on social media if you just look at Inuit Youth. But thank you for your question.
I want to direct a question at Geoff and Imran and then to Cassy. So, Geoff, being in Canada, you don't necessarily have some of the challenges or you don't have to do the arm twisting to get investment in education like we have to here. I'd like to talk about just where you feel that's headed in your country. And Imran, we've just inaugurated a new mayor who has made promises that the most important thing is that investment in our students. And I wanted for you to talk about what kind of investment you want to see, especially in the work you do, that would create opportunities like this and more.
So in terms of investment in Canada's education system, yeah, we're blessed with a great education system, both elementary, secondary, post-secondary. There's in the north, though, I would say it also doesn't apply the same way it does in the rest of the country, which is part of this really shameful part of Canada's history that we're trying to change. And you mentioned tonight was a night of reconciliation. We're on that road of reconciliation in our country. But we got a long way to go still, and part of it is addressing education that is place-based, it's culturally based and sensitive. It language, retaining your language is the essence of keeping your culture. So there's that. From our perspective with Students on Ice, as a program, we have to fight hard for every dollar we get from great countries, partners, philanthropy, corporate sponsors, and on and on. I just wanted to make one other comment too about Bruce and Vicki at the beginning, that question, why did they do this? I think it's because they saw the value of experiential education. That's the one thing that is proven to work. And it works because it touches kids here in the heart. And their heads are so full of information these days, bombarded nonstop. But when they're touched in the heart, that's when change happens, commitment, action, passion, and leadership. So the more experiences we can give ourselves, but particularly kids that touch them here, that's the secret sauce. And Bruce and Vicki saw that.
Imran?
That's a timely question for right now, and I think a lot of us here are asking ourselves about the future of our education. So I want to just say a couple of things about that, which are, first, I think when we think about equity, which is now that Chicago Public Schools have added an equity officer. The new mayor has an equity officer. The platform that we're running on is equity. It requires us to look at all the things from the funding formula for how our Chicago Public Schools gets its dollars, how those dollars are spread from what school to another. And so I say that to say, we have always looked at our city, our youth, our education system, our social services from an impoverished mindset. It's the adult's job to realize that money is not scarce. We believe it is, but it really isn't. How we use it, where it's going, and the impact that it's going to make, that is our job to figure out. So I'll give you an example. We're in the third largest public school system here in the city of Chicago. We have 360 or 370,000 students in our school system. If every single one of those students from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade learned by having one of the most experience-based, interconnected education systems in the world, every single student, 8 experiences outside of the classroom, learning in businesses, interacting with people. If every single student had that, it would cost $60 million. That is 1% of the Chicago public school budget. It depends on how you look at numbers, how you think about dollars, and how you think about what those dollars are going to do and where they go. And I think as we're moving forward into this future, all of us have to start realizing what dollars can buy and what dollars are being used at. And I think we're in a very, very special position right now where experiential learning and our work scaling experiences across the city of Chicago, this is all being baked into the vision for the future of our city, for the future of our education system, and for how we think about what it means to have an equitable education. You don't just open doors. Access was a step that we thought was equity, but opening doors is just the first step. You need to get people to the doors. You need to get them through the doors. You need to stay with them as they're in the other side, prep people on both sides, make sure that when they leave, we are reflecting deeply on what that means to us and our place in the world. And if we can create a society and a system like that here in our city, we would transform.
Thank you. Cassy, all of this is for you. Chicago Council, Vicki and Bruce, Imran, Geoff, all of us. We did this for you, for these students. What do you think of that? And going forward in your life, what does it mean for you?
You hear me? Okay. So I feel like, yeah, very astounded of everything, but I just hope it keeps on going for the people next, like such as, you know, the next students on ICE or the former students on ICE students. There's not really much I can do right now, like investment-wise, because I'm so young, but I do invest my time. I'm part of the Embark Alumni Board. We help kids who are having that sort of struggle with college or at-home struggles, and we help them out there. I've been helping a lot with that. So I just want to say thank you to them all because it's really making an impact, and it's just like sort of like the domino effect. Once you hit one, you're hitting multiple. So it's like I'm really trying to be that beacon of like inspiration for those kids.
Thank you. I know we're over time, but Vicki and I, we had talked about this on the phone before this event. Okay, so we've done this, now what? So what? Go.
So what? So everything. So I think, you know, today is what's showing what's possible and how important it is to have these connections, but how important it is to think about what we can do with our time and our treasure and our talent to bring forward more connections like these, to create more opportunities for youth in our city to have an experiential education, whether it's journeying to the Arctic or journeying to Whole Foods and go to the grocery store for the first time. So I think if we just think premeditatively about what do we have, what's in our bag of tricks that we can use on a daily basis to move this forward.
Thank you all for coming. This has been incredible. Thank you. So go ahead.
I just wanted to say one thing. This summer, you can follow Liliana and Donovan on the expedition. Starting July 25th on our website, every day is tracked. There's videos, there's blogs, studentsonice.com, and we might even Steve doesn't know this yet, but we're going to try to do an interview with Steve from the Arctic on your radio station while we're there. So
there you go. Oh boy. All right. So Bruce and Vicki will be over there at the table. They'll be signing books. Books are available for purchase. I think at least a penny of that revenue will go to the kids. I can guarantee you that. So please go over there, buy a copy, and if you don't want a copy, buy some copies and give them away to someone. And all of our guests are here, so feel free to come forward, ask them any questions. What all you good people can do when you walk out of these doors, they'll be more than happy to tell you. So thank you. And thank you.